Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is Tom Florian. I'm with the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union. We're excited to have you here today as we talk about general guidelines for fall sports. Joined today by our panelists from the Girls Athletic Union and the High School Athletic Association. We have Executive Directors Gene Berger and Tom Keating, and then sport administrators from both organizations, Jared Chizik, Jason Esslinger, Chad Ellsbury, Todd Tharp, Lisa Brinkmeyer, and Gary Ross. Some logistics before we begin. Please know that the chat function has been disabled for this webinar. However, we do encourage you to utilize the question and answer Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Throughout the presentation, feel free to ask questions. Our sport administrators will do their best to answer sport-specific questions and general questions throughout the presentation. We're going to try and limit this presentation to an hour to be respectful of everyone's time. So at the end, if time allows, we will go through some more questions and answers live, but we will do our best to maintain that 1 hour time frame. Following the presentation, actually after the presentation, it will be recorded. So we will post that and share that link to the recording after today's presentation, along with a transcript to question and answers that we have answered, as well as questions that may still remain after time runs out. So we do appreciate you being here with us this morning. At this time, I'd like to pass it off to Gary Ross for our presentation.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. And again, thank you to the ADs for everything you've done, and we'll be continuing to do this fall as we kind of transition into our fall athletic programs. One of the things to note that these recommendations again, should not supersede any guidelines or mandates, requirements, or orders put in place by the different entities that are listed there. One of the important things it's to note is the responsibility of the home team to provide proper administrative supervision, not the coach. You know, and the key thing there is to assure the compliance with the different guidelines as set forth. It's very important that there be an administration there present to supervise the event. The return to learn and competition, all schools, and again, as you know, there are a lot of different return to learn plans throughout the state, but all schools, regardless of their return to learn plan, will be eligible to participate in the IHSAA and IGHSAU sport programs. The decision regarding whether or not to allow teams to participate rests solely with the local school districts. And again, if schools are deciding not to participate in a sport this fall, they should send written notice from the superintendent or designee to Tom Keating at the Iowa High School Athletic Association or Gene Berger at the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union by August 17th. Regarding eligibility options, you know, they're really, if a school does not offer a program, there's really two options. One is the ability to have a cooperative sharing agreement program. Again, as you know, if that does occur, you know, in terms of classification, it does involve adding the beds enrollments together to form your classification. And that we encourage, and basically that after that first week of practices would need to know whether that's an option. And then the second one would be in a district that not offering the sport, a student may open enroll into another district if it is approved by the districts, and they would be immediately eligible in that sport to participate. In the other sports, that student would be ineligible if the school they left was offering that sport. Regarding academic eligibility, as we had come out with guidelines early in the year, all students are eligible for fall sports. The key thing is they still need to be enrolled in an equivalent of 4 full credit courses to be eligible, whether it's online, in person, through junior colleges, et cetera, et cetera. Regarding the physicals, as noted by Governor Reynolds' amendment on June 25th, all physicals that have been signed on or after July 1st, 2019 are good through December of 2020. That allows the individuals, if they're not able to get into their doctor or physician, to be able to have some time to be able to still be able to participate in the fall activities. They should use the previous physical form, as the revised one has not been approved for distribution. Regarding the return to learn and concussion protocol, again, that is something that due to the different formats for return to learn, will be implemented. The key thing is a day of school, regardless of how the instruction is delivered, is considered a day of school. Transportation obviously is one of the things that I know that many of you have visited with your transportation departments regarding how are you going to be transporting to and from activities. And again, that guidelines comes from the Department of Education regarding transportation. Regarding possible positive COVID-19 cases, the Iowa Department of Public Health is developing guidance for county health departments and schools regarding protocols when a student and or student athlete reports COVID-19 symptoms, a positive test result, or contact with a person with a positive COVID-19 test result. As we've communicated with the Iowa Department of Public Health, they are going to continually to work with the individual county Department of Public Health to hopefully develop some consistency on how the different counties are handling these situations. Each school should identify a point of contact, and that's real critical to have a plan in place for the athletes, coaches, and other personnel to report when a student experiences COVID-19 symptoms, a positive test result, or contact with a person with a positive test result. This identified person then would be responsible for reporting it to the local public health. So it's very critical to have those contacts within your district to have a point of contact in the event that you do have the above listed symptoms or cases. Each school, and this is very critical, should develop a communication plan to notify the relevant people, such as the players, coaches, and spectators, when contact tracing indicates the need to. You know, as we had done in the softball and baseball season, self-screening and reporting to the school representative is critical in terms of practices and competitions. And again, individual schools can determine whether it's the student just doing the self-screening or if they're having other individuals such as the coach, AD, or trainer do the health screening. And again, any individual reporting symptoms or temperatures of 100.4 or higher should be isolated until they can safely return home. An important, you hear this all the time, is regarding social distancing. And I think that would be the overarching safety principle in all areas of our athletic activities, whether it be meetings, practices, travel, instruction, drills, benches, spectators, locker rooms, training rooms, concessions, restrooms, etc. The individual should maintain 6 feet of social distancing. You know, hand sanitizing is another mitigation effort that has been very strongly encouraged. And again, before, during, and after practice and competition, non-touch hand sanitizers may be used. I know we have schools that are providing it for their practices and competitions. They should all have their own personal sanitizer as well. And then especially sanitize before touching common equipment or other items. As we mentioned with equipment there, any equipment that is shared by student athletes should be sanitized before and after practice, as well as competition. They should never share towels or other items. Each individual should bring their own clean towel to begin practice. Towels should be laundered after each practice and competition. Locker rooms is something that, again, conversation that you have with your day-to-day administration regarding the use of locker rooms, but locker rooms may be used and should be sanitized every day and after by each and every group. Schools should coordinate with their maintenance and custodial departments regarding sanitation. All school-issued and personal clothing, equipment, and other items should be taken home following practices and or contests. Locker rooms should not be used as a storage area for clothing. Now, that does not mean that students at the beginning of the day cannot bring their equipment or their clothes for the day and put it in their locker clean, and when they're done for the day, take it home. That's acceptable, but not used as a storage area for items. Players, coaches, and others using locker rooms should maintain 6 feet social distancing. And again, depending on your facility, that may require you to do some type of a rotation or creating empty lockers in between to provide that 6 feet. And again, it's important, as in everything, to keep a record of the individuals that are in that rotation in case there's a need to contact tracing. Players, coaches, and others using locker rooms are strongly encouraged to wear masks while in the locker room. And that's a verbiage that we're going to be using a great deal, is strongly encouraged. Visitor locker rooms is another area that should be identified and should be sanitized prior to the arrival of team and departure of team. And that's something that if it's used throughout the day for physical education, it's important to make sure you have a plan in place to sanitize that before you have visiting schools use your locker rooms. Regarding water, as we've mentioned this summer, each individual student should have their own water container. Now that does not prevent you from having hydration stations such as coolers in which individuals must sanitize their hands prior to using the hydration station. An alternative practice is if you assign one person to fill the water bottles and have that person wear a mask and protective gloves. Host schools may provide a water source for visitors, but visitors should bring their own hydration station coolers. Now, I know many of you have water fountains in which you can hold the water bottle up to it and water is run. That is acceptable to be used as well. Spectators is probably a real critical aspect in our fall sports. Schools should implement spectator protocols by following CDC and local Department of Health guidelines regarding gatherings and social distancing. And again, that could involve conferences getting together to determine how are they going to deal with spectators. Are they going to grant a certain number per student? Are they going to have X's on their bleachers, et cetera, et cetera? But that is a critical part that I know that ADs are concerned about, is how are you going to be handling the spectators in the different sports. Spectators should use the 6 feet social distancing. And again, that's not to prevent families from sitting or standing together, but social distance from others. And again, I think it's real critical that we have frequent reminders, via our daily announcements or public address or on our website, just emphasizing the need for social distancing at our events. And this last part, we hear a great deal from people asking, just as businesses may require customers to wear masks, schools may require spectators to wear masks at their school. So that is an option that many schools are doing. But again, that is up to the host school and or conferences determine how they're going to handle the use of masks regarding spectators. Press box, scores bench, as we all know, different sizes and different facilities are different in this area, but these areas should be limited to the essential personnel. And we're defining the essential personnel as scorekeepers, scoreboard operator, and announcer. In football, this would also include the home and visitor coaching staffs. Again, that may need to be a case of making adjustments in terms of the number that are there, because they still would need to, practice the 6 feet social distancing that are in the press box. Media, we're going to be expanding in our next little aspect regarding some guidelines for our media. Schools should communicate with media regarding protocols for practices and games. And it's strongly recommended that 6 feet of social distancing be included and priorities given to, home, then visiting, then coverage regarding that. Procedures should be established regarding interview requests. What is going to be the identifying area where interviews will be conducted? How often will they be done? Where will they be done? And establishing a required time frame in which the media can proceed with interviews with coaches and or athletes. Concession stands is another, I guess, big area that we've heard a lot from ADs, and there was a little bit of not clarity in the guidance that was sent out there, but this hopefully will help. Concession stands that are located on school property are allowed to operate effective August 24th. As you note, there was a proclamation on July 24th that was extended for 30 days. So again, this includes concession stands that are operated, for example, by a booster club or other independent contractor, and concession stands licensed as temporary food establishments and mobile units. Those located on school property must comply with the requirements in the concession stand guidance that has been submitted. So again, if it's on school property with proper licensure and following the guidance, they can be used as of August 24th for your booster clubs. That's a key thing. Concession stands are located on school property, operated by a nonprofit organization that would be otherwise exempt from licensure as a food establishment, must comply with the requirements in the concession stand guidance. And then concession stands at private or professional facilities located off of school property. Many of you may use a school or community facilities. They are used to hosting high school athletic events, are allowed to operate under the same provisions as a restaurant or a bar in requiring concession stand guidance and licensure. Training rooms, all individuals using the training room should wear a face mask at all times. Host site athletic training rooms should not be available for visiting teams in pre or post-game treatments. If a team travels without an athletic trainer, all pre-game taping, bracing should be completed before leaving for the event. Host site athletic trainers should be contacted prior to the trip to plan for any requested accommodations. And again, taping exam tables should be disinfected before and after and maintain the 6 feet of social distancing, as well as cold and hot tubs should be used only by one individual and drained, cleaned, and disinfected between individual use and at the beginning and end of each and every day. A couple of the questions that had surfaced is, does this involve only high school varsity? This guidance is intended for high school, varsity, sub-varsity, and junior high. So it's all inclusive as overseen by the IGHSAU and the IHSAA for the fall. We've attached some specific documents to help in the sports specific. You can see these listed. Those are both on the boys and the girls websites, specifically related to football. You know, our joint cross country is listed on both the girls and the boys, volleyball and the girls, golf and the boys, and the girls swimming and diving on the girls website. So this is kind of a guidance that we would hope that would be used on a regular basis. In addition to that, we have some partner links that are important to look at some specifics, such as the Iowa Department of Public Health. That's critical for guidelines on COVID-19 public health tips. The Iowa Department of Education regarding on guidance from the Department of Ed. And then of course the IGHSAU, Iowa High School Music Association, Iowa High School Speech Association, Iowa High School Athletic Association are also critical links that we use. And with that, hopefully I got through there, so it gives an opportunity for questions to be answered, many which might be general guidelines and others that might be sport specific. So with that, Tom, I can see we have still a few Q&As yet to answer.
You bet. Thanks, Gary. Appreciate you spending some time on that presentation. Folks, thank you for submitting some questions. We've already answered a few throughout the presentation, but this time we're going to go through the live questions that are still out there and answer them over the presentation. So the first one here would like to have answered is, assuming all new to sports students and incoming 7th graders will need to have a physical. Jean, I believe you said you were going to answer that question live.
Correct. If they don't have a physical, they need a physical.
All right. And then the next question we have here is, any idea on when we should expect to hear from the Department of Education regarding transportation guidelines for fall sports?
I don't. Maybe Tom. We can certainly talk to Ann Lebo about that again. I don't anticipate a lot of changes for falls, but
yeah, I'll visit with Ann today and ask her to have the DE get something out, even if it just says follow summer guidelines. You folks need to hear what they have to say, and I'm guessing it's going to just reflect what schools will have to do for their students coming to school.
All right, thank you. Next question we have here is, will the COVID-19 guidance be shared by the Department of Public Health prior to August 17th?
Tom and I were on the call yesterday, and it was indicated to us that the governor's office is going to go back to the Iowa Department of Public Health to speed that up. They're going to ask for that. We've asked for it on multiple occasions, so we are hopeful now that it will get out.
Okay. The next question here is similar. When can we expect transportation guidance, and are there major changes from the summer? Similar answer to what we just gave. The next question here is, unlike baseball season baseball and softball season where they could check temperatures right before a practice or a game, students would not have checked their temperatures since the morning before school. So when asking athletes to self-monitor, is that going by the morning temperature? Is that good enough? Or should they check the temperatures before practice or game since it's been a full 8 hours?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the answer is if they did not go home after school, then it's a continuation of the school day, and they're still good. If they did go home and then they returned, then it would be a good idea to check with them again.
Our next question is, what are the opinions on community or non-school related programs that utilize school facilities for practice or events?
Local control. So I think it's going to depend on how comfortable your school board is with allowing outside groups to use your facilities.
Yeah, check the Department of Ed guidance on reopening your facilities. There's some things in there about that.
Our next question is related to face coverings. If a school requires masks, does that take them out of hosting postseason events since the mandate is not coming from the state and is above what is recommended by the state?
I think what we would say at this point is that's in discussion. I would say our first inclination is to say, no, it's not required. No, you would not be held out of postseason. It's your facility, and it's a safety measure you're taking into consideration. Now, if it comes down to the competitors, that's a different story. In baseball and softball, we did not allow one school to require that another school's competitors wear masks. So I think we would probably say at this point, we're in discussion, but again, my first response to that is it wouldn't hold you out.
Agreed, and officials as well. You know, we carved out officials must wear a mask as well. You can't require the official or the opposing team, but we'll talk about it.
The next is in relation to student sections. The parent section may be easier to monitor and social distance, but what are thoughts about student sections?
Gene, if you don't mind, I want to answer this in general first, and then let you jump in on the students. One thing to keep in mind is that so much of this has to be personal responsibility. When you go to a store or another place that's requiring social distancing, there is no one person walking around saying, you're too close, you're too close. There has to be personal responsibility for this, and you as ADs cannot be expected to walk around during the game and tell people to move apart. You put things in place, you put guidelines in place. You may get called by someone to say, hey, the people next to us refuse to move. Then I guess you get involved in that. But as far as just overall monitoring of that, I think you just keep communicating and reminding people of what their responsibility is. Now, when it comes to student sections, people are trying lots of different things. Some are eliminating the student section altogether and creating like little pods around the stadium where students can be, and X number of students in each pod or each area. Again, that's going to require some creativity and require some communication and some education. But the nature of the beast is, we know it. Kids want to be together. They want to get next to each other, and they want to interact with each other. So I think get those student leaders together in your school and get them to be the ones that do the reminding to each other and hold each other accountable.
Our next question is in relation to concession or post-game meals and team suppers. Can teams have team suppers and or post-game meals provided by parents or boosters?
Well, what the guidance we were given in the summer is that when people are serving themselves and the people preparing the food are not licensed or a restaurant, then no, you can provide food that's prepackaged and made for the individual, like a sub sandwich, things like that. But we have asked for more guidance on this, but it is kind of out of the school control when they go to someone's home. But the guidance right now is probably not.
Next question is in regards to concession stands. Can we clarify concession stands again? Can a booster club use the school facility without a separate license?
The answer is yes, but they have to follow the same guidelines that a licensed facility would follow.
And a follow-up on concession stands, where can the guidelines be found?
It was in a Zoom from the Department of Ed under food service. I can send that out or post it, but also under the Department of Inspections and Appeals. It should be under there, but the latest bullet points that we got were from a Zoom from the Department of Ed in the food service area.
The next question is in regards to the presentation on July 29th. It states that concession stands are still not allowed, but the presentation mentioned they are legal. Can we just clarify those differences?
You're able to use a concession stand as of August 24th on school property.
The next question is in regards to weight rooms. When will weight room guidelines change? Are they still expected to keep kids in pods of no more than 10, or can they begin to lift as teams now?
I would say the guidelines are the same until you hear differently from us. We want to visit with our Athletic Trainers Association and see if they have any adjustments that they feel we could make to those or any relaxation of the guidelines. But for now, they're the same.
If a student is coming from a different state, has a home in both the previous district in the state as well as our district, are they eligible to play football or any sport in our district if they are enrolled in our district for school?
Well, it's up to the receiving school to clarify or to get, to make sure that the family has moved to the area to make a home and be residents in the district and not simply live there so the kid can play athletics. So things like rental agreements, sale of previous home, cancellation of previous rental agreement, Iowa driver's license, utility bills, etc. It's up to the school to go to the lengths they feel they need to go to make sure that the family is all above board on this. We obviously, with the number of situations that come up, we can't do that. We don't have the personnel power to do that. So we depend on our schools to make sure that's happening. Just like we have in the past, in any situation. COVID has gives us one more reason people are moving to Iowa, but people have moved into Iowa in the past, and we just follow those same guidelines.
I think a couple critical factors. One is you can only have one home. That's important. You can't have two homes, and it needs to be a contemporaneous move where the complete family need to move and establish that as their home. You can't have dad and the son come to Iowa while the mom stays back home and have that student eligible. It needs to be a contemporaneous move, and it needs to be, you need to have one home.
Next question is in regards to storing equipment. Our 7th and 8th grade football team students typically ride the bus. Could we have them sanitize the equipment and store it in a sanitized area overnight outside of a locker room?
That'd be a good creative solution.
Next question is in regards to remote and online learning. If a school moves to remote or online learning, are there any hosting or eligibility ramifications?
Not from our associations.
Next question is in regards to volleyball. Can volleyball teams sit on opposite sides of the court to help social distancing?
We are providing some accommodations to teams to help with social distancing. One of them being that they are allowed to stand not just those in the active rotation. If social distancing needs to occur, that can't be handled by being seated. I guess a couple questions I'd have with this is, are you moving both teams to the opposite side of the court to be away from fans? And also would the R1 stand move in the score bench? I mean, there's some things, we want to keep this as consistent as we can with what our current rules are. So I guess I would rather you contact me to ask your specific questions. But if it's moving both teams to the opposite side of the court to move them away from fans, we would be okay with that. But if you're moving one team across from the other, I think we'd have to have some questions answered on some of the structure with that before you do that.
Next question is, if spectators are required to wear masks, does the social distancing of 6 feet still have to be recognized?
Social distancing is the overall guiding principle. Masks are to be worn when that cannot be, when you find yourself in a situation where you can't do that, but you still should be trying to social distance. They're not a substitute for not social distancing.
The next question is in relation to athletes transferring from out of state. How will the transfer rule be interpreted in light of athletes moving from other states that are not having fall sports seasons? As the policy states, the move cannot solely be for school or athletic purposes.
That's confusing language. And what it means is the transfer cannot be solely for school or athletic reasons. It has to be, as Gary mentioned previously, it has to be a bona fide or contemporaneous move of the entire family for the purpose of making a home in the district. And that's really the only way it can be measured is, did the entire family move? Have they relocated? Are they now employed, in that area, et cetera? That would indicate that they're not there solely for school or athletic purposes. I know it's confusing language, certainly, but you have to separate both out. It's the transfer that can happen solely for that. It has to be a move with it.
All right, it looks like we're gonna clarify some concession stand items next. If a school runs the concession stand, do they need to be inspected in order to operate?
As of the July 29th guidance, no, but they have to follow the same guidelines. Jean, is that how you interpreted it?
Yep. So the school group run is not a booster, yes, but it doesn't matter. It still has to follow the guidance. If you have a concession stand, licensed or not, it has to follow the guidance.
All right, so just to clarify, everyone, need to follow the guidance when it comes to concession stands. I think we've answered all of those questions now. What about pregame meals sold by the school at the school? Yes or no?
Well, how are they prepared? When you say a pregame meal sold by the school, is that prepackaged? Is it a sack lunch by your school lunch? It kind of makes a difference on what the pregame meal is and how it's sold, I guess. But there is a way you could do it. I'm not sure from that question exactly how you're proposing to do it.
And then just to clarify, so can concession stands prepare food, or does it have to be prepackaged? My assumption is, can they grill hamburgers and hot dogs at the concession stand, or does it have to be a prepackaged item?
I think that still goes back to the
Guidance.
Department of Inspection and Appeals guidance. If you're following that, that should tell you what you can and cannot do.
The next question is, please explain the reasoning to not have a rule that applies to everyone about a positive COVID test and how it impacts if the team is shut down or not. is there a way to have consistency across the board?
Well, we have asked the Iowa Department of Public Health for more guidance on it, and that's what is coming. But the reason it's not the same is because the virus activity is different in different parts, and the exposures could be different. They could be indirect or direct exposures. So when you get into contact tracing, it doesn't necessarily mean a one size fits all. I don't know that we thought it was going to be fair. But we are working on getting more consistency in the decision-making process.
I think the desire is to have a process that's the same throughout the state, but that doesn't mean, you know, again, like Gene talked about with contact tracing, that could be different depending on the level of the connection, but the process that is used is what the Department of Public Health is going to provide us.
The next two questions are related to volleyball. Are we allowed to have dual net matches in a single gym? And can you clarify the stance of two volleyball games occurring simultaneously on side-by-side courts?
Sure, that is a recommendation that we had to try to avoid exposure. And it is a recommendation, if possible, to avoid playing matches side by side at the same time. Part of this is for gyms that have 3 courts, and maybe just eliminating that central court and giving some spacing for that. Or if you have another gym in your facility, to utilize that gym rather than the side-by-side courts. Again, it's just a recommendation, something that we're trying to help with schools to do some social distancing. Something else to think about is if you have those courts that are side-by-side and you're going to be playing on those side-by-side courts, to stagger your benches. A lot of times those team benches back up right to each other. So some way that you could social distance them, or maybe move the benches to the opposite side of those courts that are side by side, would help as well. So again, it's just a recommendation.
Next question is in regards to multiple home ownership. So if you own 2 homes, how does that impact eligibility, such as a vacation home? Can we clarify?
Well, the purpose of the contemporaneous parental move and being in one home is so that you can evaluate where that family is living. Half the family can't live in one home in another state, and half the family in Iowa, for the purposes of being eligible. So it's really what they're doing, you know, with that vacation home. So clearly they can have a vacation home. It's just, are they using that vacation home to try to gain immediate eligibility? So that's a judgment. But when we were talking about not having 2 homes, it's in the context of all of these out-of-state transfers that seem to be occurring because the states around us are not offering sports. So saying I have a home in Illinois and a home in Iowa, and I want to move to Iowa to be immediately eligible, doesn't meet the contemporaneous parental move.
And another example of owning a home and then renting an apartment in another community, that's not acceptable either. That's, you know, again, where is their home? Where are they truly living? And that's something that you need to investigate. You need to check and making sure that they are truly living in one location.
And as always, if you're unsure, call us and we can talk you through it. You know, just make sure you've acquired all the information that you can and that you have, and then give us a call and run it by us, and we can tell you whether it passes the smell test or not.
Next question is in relation to athlete travel. Is there or can there be a travel limitation when an athlete goes on vacation, etc.? Can they quarantine when they get back before they are with the team? Can mileage be limited? There is an example here that there's a city in Nebraska that is limiting travel with athletes, and if they travel beyond a certain distance, they must quarantine before rejoining their team.
We haven't seen anything from the Department of Public Health that says we need to do that. And unless we do, then I would say that's local. If your school district or your county is concerned about where people travel and they would like quarantine, then yes. But overall, we haven't received any guidance on that, or we haven't received any requirements about that.
Our next question is in relation to pregame meals. This team has pregame meals on Thursday nights and are planning to have a walk-through line for athletes with meals prepared and put into individual containers and then eaten together as a team, but socially distanced. Parents will be the ones preparing the meal. Is this permissible?
Well, how are the parents preparing it? Are they following all the guidance from the Department of Inspection and Appeals for, I mean, is it on site? That sort of thing. That one, I don't know. Maybe we can get more guidance on it, but doesn't exactly explain to me how it's not all prepared at once and then just putting in a container. The difference between that and like a sub sandwich is that sub sandwich is prepared in and of itself and put in a bag. But maybe Tom has some other thoughts on that.
I think one part that would not be is, you know, how in the past, sometimes they would have they'd have one food in one area and the kids would self-serve and go on through the line. That's the part that isn't, versus it's prepared, you know, prepared together and then distributed is a little different matter.
I would say, you know, this isn't official from us, but I would say as an administrator, I would say no. I mean, there's no way to know, did the people who prepared the food, were they gloved up? Did they have masks on? Did they take precautions? Was everything sanitized prior to it? There's just no way of knowing that if the food is prepared off-site and brought in. But that, again, we don't have any, you know, I think I'd lean heavily on the Department of Public Health again, or your county health. But I would say that would be a hard one for me to say that's okay for parents to bring food in or prepare it. As wonderful as that is for people to step up and do it, I just don't know that would be appropriate.
Gene, the next question here, you have mentioned you're going to answer this one live here. The Department of Inspections and Appeals guidance released on July 29th says that concessions are not allowed, and that could be the reason why there's some confusion. Can you clarify that one final time here?
I just think that's old information, and they haven't updated their website yet. I talked to Thomas Mays at the Department of Ed, and he said they were going to update it, and then the information on concession stands that we gave you today came out from a Zoom from the Department of Ed. So August 24th is the date when concession stands are permissible, and under the guidance and the guidelines that we've outlined. So the Department of Inspections Appeals website does say, but I don't think it's updated. I think that's the answer to it.
Next question is, what will determine a team shutting down for a period of time and creating a no contest? Will it be percentage of the team, or will it be up to each individual district? What is the protocol?
What's the reason for the shutdown of the team, I guess? Is it an individual? Is it a school decision? Is a school shutting down? Shutting down a team, I view as a district decision in consultation with the Department of Public Health in your county.
The next question is related to data collection. If there are games that are affected by COVID, is a school required to report these instances to the Athletic Association and Girls Athletic Union for data collection?
Yes, please.
Yes.
The next question is, with people being able to work from anywhere, does employment outside of the area matter? Just the fact that they live in the district as a family?
Well, let me give you an example. If somebody lived in Davenport and worked in Davenport and moved to Dubuque as a family, they no longer have a residence in Davenport, and the member of the family, the parent who works in Davenport now travels to Davenport every day to work. They don't have a home in Davenport anymore. They've moved to Dubuque, that's their residency, so the student would be eligible in Dubuque. Even though the parent did not change jobs, even though the job is in a different town, they've established their residency in that district. And I know, that opens a lot of questions as to why did they do that? And they're just required to do that. They have one home. That home is in the district. Where that parent decides to commute to travel or to commute to work is out of the equation.
Would it be local control to have a dance team perform at games? I believe I'm getting some nods. Yes. Yes, it would be local control. The next question is for volleyball. Does a drop-down curtain make up for social distancing?
Again, remember, it is only a suggestion, a recommendation about avoiding playing side by side. So you don't have to have a curtain or a divider with that to be able to play side by side. But if you're thinking about exposure, I would say if it's just a net, it wouldn't probably provide as much limiting the exposure as an actual drop-down curtain would. A drop-down curtain would do a much better job of distancing the courts from each other and players from each other.
The next question is, if a team cancels their season, students from that school would be allowed eligibility if they open enroll to an area district, correct? They would just have to abide by the 90-day rule after the season?
Sorry, I'm digesting the question here. I think that's something we're going to have to dive into deeper. If a school decided to not have the program, then the answer would be yes. But if they started the program and then cancel the season, in the middle of it, let's say, I think that's a different situation. So if they cancel in the middle, the answer is no. If they decide not to have the program from the start, then those two or that rule that Gary mentioned earlier in the presentation applies.
And I think the 90-day that you're referring to must be in other sports. If the school you transferred from offers that, I would bet that's what you're saying. If that be the case, you are correct that that student would be ineligible for 90 school days after that.
This is an FYI from an athletic director. They just provided this email response from the Department of Ed this morning. They did say concession stands that are located on school property are allowed to operate effective August 24th. The department has partnered with the Department of Inspections and Appeals on the development of this resource, and it will be updated on the website soon. Our next question is, if a kid or coach tests positive, does the team have to shut down or just that individual? For how long? Who makes the decision? Please clarify.
Well, it depends. Public health, county public health should be consulted. Depends on the contact of that individual with people. It depends on the mitigation that you were having. Were they socially distanced? Were they wearing a mask? Was it for 3 minutes or 20 minutes? It's not, there's no one size fit all when a positive test, it's not all the same. There's some similarities, and most of the time in the summer, they shut the team down, but not always.
Next question is related to football. Can the chain gang be set up on the home side so as not to intermingle with the opponents?
I just replied to that. At this particular time, that's not something that we are looking at doing. There are just some things that would change regarding officials having to switch sides of the field. Also, that's a rule change that we'd have to make, which is an option or two. We'll discuss that with our officials during their clinics over the next week or two and see how comfortable they are with that change being made. But as of right now, moving the chain crew to the home side is not being considered.
Our next question for clarification, when does junior high sport practice begin? August 24th or the first day of school? Please clarify.
I believe the junior high manual covers that, right, Gary? And I think
Yeah, I don't have that with, it's the first day of school or the Monday. Let's see, Thursday, 24th is what, is that, a Thursday? Let me look. That has not changed
24th.
due to the COVID. That has not changed due to COVID. It's what our junior high manual says.
Is the 24th for junior high sports.
All right, looks like we have a couple of questions left here before we reach our end of presentation at 11 a.m. Our next question is, what makes a transfer student eligible in a private school immediately? Is it establishing residence in public district in which the private school lies?
the answer is generally yes, unless the student comes in and had previously attended a non-public school. So if the student attended a non-public school and transfers to a non-public school, then they don't have to be within the boundaries of the public school district within which the non-public school is located. So example would be if a student from Des Moines, Lincoln moves to Cedar Rapids area, Xavier High School is located in the Cedar Rapids Public School District boundaries. So if the student came from Des Moines, Lincoln and wanted to go to Xavier, they would have to reside in the Cedar Rapids Public School District. If, however, that student transferred from Dowling Catholic into the area, they could move into the Linn-Mar district and attend Xavier and be eligible. So if you come from public school to non-public, you have to be in the district or the district boundaries. If you come from a non-public to a non-public, you don't have to be in, you've already established you've been in a non-public school before.
Our next question is related to taking temperatures, and I believe the answer to this, the question is, are temperatures to be taken before games or practice? But I believe the answer that was given earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if a temperature is taken before the school day and then the student athlete does not return home before practices or games, then it's a continuation of the school day and a temperature would not need to be retaken. Can anyone add clarification to that?
I think the clarification is there's a health assessment that needs to be made. You know, whether you do it right before practice or at the start of the school day, yes, there's a health assessment, a temperature check, even though it's one of many factors. You can't just not do it. When you do it depends.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions. This next question, just provide an answer to our athletic directors. Will there be a webinar for football coaches, for cross-country coaches, like the volleyball coach webinar?
Yes,
Yes.
And our sport administrators will be sending that information out if they have not already to those coaches.
Correct.
And our final question here before we let everyone go is just to clarify, if a middle school or junior high starts before August 24th, can they start practice the first day of school if it is before the 24th?
Yes, the first day of school or August 24th,
Yes.
whichever is first.
yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Gary. And thank you to all of our panelists this morning for being with us for this webinar. As a reminder, we will post this recording to our respective websites for you to review after the fact. We'll also provide a PDF of the slide deck, and we will also work on a transcript of these question and answers in a consolidated fashion that you can reference back to as well. Feel free to send additional questions to our sport administrators as they come up. We'll do our best to answer them. But again, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for all that you do to serve your student athletes, teams, coaches, and communities. And we wish you all the best this fall. Thank you.